assassination. Stay away from that, kids.
Let's move on. Talk about staying away from things. You went to a reform meeting. Now that was a
Oh
late one. Come
yes,
on, that was a good
yeah,
one.
you did well there. Again, don't comment
We'll
on it,
cut
but
that.
comment on your success. Yeah, I've been to a couple of reform meetings. One was to see Carl Benjamin, who was giving a talk a few months ago,
Sargon of
and
Akkad.
Sargon of Akkad. I never really understood what that was,
So
but anyway,
that's his YouTube channel.
yeah. But what is it? What is a
It's
Sargon of Akkad?
I didn't know, but I looked up when he first came prominence. It's like he's a real guy. He's like an ancient
Yeah.
kind of Genghis Khan figure, like, but sometime
Um,
in the thing about people like Carl Benjamin is they've got this like, I mean, maybe it's a genuine love, but they sort of like would love to flaunt their understanding of sort of classical historical figures and
oh
events
yes, okay.
in a kind
That's,
of
yeah.
weird political way. When men, Genghis Khan, when men were men.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, yeah. So,
Um,
yeah, I just think it's good to go to different political meetings. I obviously don't
Yeah, no, I
vote
think it's
for
really
them.
interesting. I never get out of the
Um,
house. That's my excuse. I mean, I'd be at reform meetings every night otherwise.
yeah, I haven't seen any other political meetings around here. There's the Reform one, but obviously, because I stood last summer for the Workers' Party, Galloway's party, and in a way, Galloway's party is a little. At least I think everyone sees that those are kind of polar opposites, but actually, there's quite a lot of crossover between those parties. It's
Well,
just
you
the
say that, but I think
reform is,
a lot of people see them as the same thing as well.
yeah, I think,
I don't agree with that, but you say a lot of people see them as polar opposites. Just as
yeah,
many people will be like, this is bloody horseshoe
yes,
theory. Um,
I think you're probably right there.
I
Yeah,
mean, I don't. I mean, quickly on the Workers' Party. I thought it was really shameful in the election when people said, well, there's these really good Labour candidates. And if you don't like Keir Starmer and Keir Starmer's government and stuff, at least vote for these great Labour candidates. When it came to the Workers' Party, if there was really good candidates, they were like, no, don't vote for the Workers' Party because of George
uh,
Galloway. And
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you make of George Galloway, that kind of argument I thought was really silly. And I think people that when
Who was
they
saying that? Who was saying
oh,
that? Sorry,
just people on
Labour fans.
Twitter.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but just broadly, like there is as much as people say they hate Keir Starmer and they reject Keir Starmer's government and way of politics, it's accepted in a way that for some reason
Galloway is not.
not even Galloway's politics necessarily. It's like him as an individual and some of his own personal beliefs.
Mm,
Um,
mm. And also, I think sometimes it's not personal beliefs as well. So, for instance, I spoke to a different political group, um, and who are quite sympathetic to, well, very sympathetic to Corbyn, um, and I was trying to drill down why they sort of felt a bit that Galloway was a bit like not their thing, and ultimately, what I kind of found was that they didn't like it because I think he was insisting on standing his MPs, standing his candidates, even in areas where they wouldn't necessarily win. And so I think some people, some of the Corbynite people, who obviously I do really like I'm a Corbynite person, but they were sort of saying, well, that's very kind of arrogant and aggrandizing. And he should have just sort of just fallen in with us, really. It's like, well, is that really a reason to kind of shun like the probably the best political speaker in our country?
by the
And then the
way,
other,
who were
and
they?
then
Who were these people saying falling in with us? Who was their candidate? They're talking about independence.
I don't want to identify exactly who it was, but it was basically it was people to do with the Corbyn movement.
No,
Um,
but what kind of candidates were they supporting? Independents?
Mainly Jeremy. Um,
Oh, I see. Because the Worker
uh,
Party was running in Islington North, presumably.
yeah, I think this was. I'm not sure if the Workers' Party did run in Islington North. I don't know the details of that. Um, I'm making a more broader point, really, that even people who are actually ideologically and politically allied to Galloway had a bit of an issue, I think, with his tactics. But I also, but I, which I sort of thought, well, that's kind of something and nothing really. And I think sometimes you have to stand your people anyway for all sorts of other
Yeah.
reasons that are kind of legit to do with
I mean, not knowing the people that you're talking about
yeah.
and not having any idea about what the arguments might be, I'd say that they're full of shit, to be honest.
I think
I
I
don't
think
buy it.
I'm
I don't buy it. I think it's really much deeper sort of it's to do with the political positions of Galloway, but it's also a kind of
yeah.
repulsion of Galloway
That's what
on
I'm
a very childish level, which I think is just really unhelpful. Um, which is never and it's something to do with hard left and maybe hard right or just there is even within, as you say, Corbynite sort of Corbyn following left wing sort of people, a want for a kind of establishment
mm,
credibility
hmm and
uh,
style.
and
Uh,
style.
and tone. And that was the other thing I was going to mention, which is when I spoke to that group, the kind of consensus came out of it was basically also just that, well, George Galloway's loud, isn't he? He's really loud. I was like, do you mean that he speaks very clearly and he sounds a bit like a Shakespearean actor? And they're like, well, yes. But so I think sometimes, like you say, it does, I think, sometimes come down to there is politics and there is ideology, but sometimes it's sort of just taste of the way that someone presents themselves. It's a bit like liking a musical artist. You know, why do I prefer Lana Del Rey to Taylor Swift? You know, they produce very similar chords and everything, but there's just a slight tonal difference. And I think sometimes people get very hung up on those kind of tonal differences. The tonal difference between Galloway and Corbyn is, you know, just that one of them speaks loudly and one of them doesn't. But they're both as nice or as whatever as and have as sensible policies as the other. And we shouldn't have those kind of divisions. And that's why I like to go and see lots of different political groups, because where possible, I think it is good to be able to have dialogue with across the spectrum.
I mean, I don't like Galloway, but I certainly see the
Oh,
much
just a
more
second. Hello. Oh, hi, Marion. Come through. Okay, next bit we have to chop out. I'm just on a podcast. Got an electrician here as well. It's a terrible time to do a podcast. So that's Marion, who does incredible artwork in that room.
It's great. This is the extended universe of NEWSCUM.
yeah, yeah. Marion's going to become a big character in season 3. But yeah, she does sign writing in there. I'm sorry to.
What is sign writing?
Cut
that. Let's go. Moving on.
Sign writing is when you have a board and you paint ornate, beautiful images and writing on that board, and then you use it for pub signs, for example.
Oh yeah, okay.
Or for to put on the front of people's houses or on the front of people's boats. I've got a sign out the front garden that says "Bee friendly," and it's got a picture of a bee on it. And Marion designed it, and it's bee friendly because it means that then I don't have to mow my lawn. It's a meadow designed for, I guess, designed for insects.
Yeah. I've always thought the environmental movement is primarily motivated by laziness.
People. Yeah.
Just
anyway, where were we?
Accepting of entropy. Yeah, well, I don't like Galloway, but I've definitely over the years become more and more think that you have to work with people.
Yeah, exactly.
And Galloway can give so much to a mass movement. You know, and I think on the broader issues, I agree with him. So I just don't see the sort of bickering, particularly wherever the fucking left is right now, to be snooty about anything at all. Like, we'll do it ourselves. Thank you very much. You won't fucking do anything, mate. You're not going to fucking get off your ass. I mean, that's the thing. People are like, oh, we need left-wing party. You know, been saying it for years, basically since Corbyn stood down. Nobody did anything about it. Come the 2024 general election, and out of nowhere, George Galloway fields candidates in almost every constituency, maybe at least half, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it was incredible. And people on the left were like, nah, but he's a bit thick, isn't he? Well, what the fuck are you doing? Anyway, yeah, you stood for the Workers' Party, and I imagine that was quite hard. I mean, one
Mm.
criticism about Galloway was that it was a little bit of a kind of not pyramid scheme, but a kind of like I remember his email was like, "You'll have to fund the campaign yourself. We're not giving you any money. You're basically on your own." It was, yeah, it was a bit like you're doing it for me, for the grand party, but the party is not going to do anything for you.
I think there wasn't a great deal that the party could do. I don't know a great deal about the internal mechanics of it. I know that I received a sort of bumper pack of leaflets and flyers and stickers and things like that, and they were always really friendly, and so that's all I really ever
But
expected
anyway, since then
from
you've moved on to reform, and now you're a hard reformer going to all the
them.
meetings.
Yeah, well, I've been to two meetings, but no, I definitely wouldn't ever vote for reform. But I think it's good to just be aware of what's going on, and also it helps you sort of not get into too much of an ideological bubble.
How did you hear about the reform meeting, the first one you went to?
One of my one of my friends, she is quite right wing, and she wanted to go, but she didn't want to go alone, so I tagged along.
And where was it?
It's just in town. It's like above a pub in town.
But it was part of the pub. It was just like the top floor of a pub, or
Yeah, I think well, it might have been actually a restaurant, and Carl Benjamin that was there, so it was really packed. And I saw the woman who stood for reform at the bar there, who I'd stood against, Theresa, and she was a little bit perplexed as to why I was there. But I'm allowed to be here. I'm just hanging out, and it was really interesting to see Carl, and it's just I don't
so
know.
was it more that Carl had come along to sort of give a speech, and then the local, well, not MP, what do you call them?
Candidate,
Representative? Candidate? Well, yeah, but
yeah,
they're
yeah.
not candidate anymore, are they?
No, they're not. I suppose they haven't really
They're
got a title.
nothing.
Then. Previous prospective parliamentary candidate. I suppose that's what I am. I think
Yeah, so she turned
former.
out, and they what had a conversation, or he gave a speech, or how did it
Yeah,
work?
Carl gave a speech. Don't know how long, maybe 40 minutes or so, and then there were questions and discussion. And last night when I went to the other one, which was just a more informal chat, there were a couple of people, including Theresa, who stood up to just have a chat a bit. And it's funny because one of the things about doing it as well is going along to groups that aren't in your normal comfort zone is you can sometimes see sort of sometimes their priorities are not scary or weird or horrible. They're just they were talking about constitutional reform and like more localized government and things like that. It's like okay. I mean, I don't
Well,
think
this
it's
is
the
another thing where there's a lot of people,
and
particularly in
freedom of
this,
speech as well. Genuinely talking about freedom
but
of speech
particularly
as,
like the
as a
sort of people, not maybe people assembly, but certainly the sort of centre right, centre left of the Labour Party, centre left more, I suppose, who are quite upset with the Starmer government, along with most of the country, and the Green Party as well, and a few other, parties and interests are looking towards having constitutional reform and getting in
mm,
proportional representation. And of
yeah.
course, reform, the party, would be a great ally in this cause. But a
Mm,
lot of people are like, well, we can't work with reform.
mm, mm,
And it's particularly funny on this one issue because the very idea of that issue would be that you'd be moving towards a kind of government where you would work with parties like Reform, but
yeah.
they see it as just a way of getting rid of the two-party system, and they
Well,
don't really think about the actual ramifications of what happens when you have proportional representation. You have to form coalitions with all sorts of parties.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, any time that the smaller parties are divided, that's when your Labours and your Conservatives, to some extent, are like, lovely, yeah, stay divided. Of course, you guys don't want to be working together. That would be terrible. I imagine how awful
Well,
that would be.
exactly, and that's the only way really to ever challenge these sort of things is by having a coalition, a broad coalition of
Well,
parties like Reform and the Green Party.
I don't know how that would work in practice,
I
but
do. It would be
I get.
great.
I think I think it's important to as a political person, if you're thinking about your own politics, to think how bad is the current government and therefore how necessary is it to take radical measures? And I think that the present
Radical
government is
measures like
really
what? Are you about to say something
well.
about Hamas?
No, I mean, as in having conversations with other political groups like Reform or whatever it is, so that
That's
so
so
that they
radical. We're going to have a conversation. You
yeah, actually
sound
that
like
would
Keir Starmer.
yeah. Yeah, well, that did sound really lame, didn't it? Very watered down. Yeah, I don't know. It's not radical solutions really, I suppose. But I just mean, oh, well, I've lost my train of thought now.
No,
But
you were saying that you're looking at the government that you have now and what sort of
we
steps is
have.
worth
Oh yeah,
taking.
I think the point is. I mean, I know probably everyone watching this knows this, but I mean, the Starmer government is atrocious. It's so bad. It's presided over a genocide. It arms a genocide. It's part of a internationally. It's an absolute disaster area. As you know, I did a series of articles last year called "The Worst Year Ever," and that's partly because we had the Biden administration and the Starmer government. We're killing millions of people in two highly volatile war zones. That has to change. So, however, well, not however, but I think it's worth taking measures and thinking outside the box to as ways of doing that. And I think that's what the Workers' Party were, trying to push for, and even Reform. Particularly towards the end of the election campaign last summer, they were talking much more explicitly about uh, ending the war in Ukraine. In fact, it was funny last night because obviously Reform doesn't foreground as much sort of what I would call the anti-war or anti-imperialist movement, but they will say on the offbeat, some of the people there were just like, "Oh yeah, are you?" Because I was saying I was anti-war, and they were like, "Oh, do you mean like the Iraq War? Oh yeah, obviously everyone's against that. Like it's just that it's not their priority. It's not the first thing that they think of." Whereas for me, I'm like, that is still I know it's 20 years on, but that's still an issue because that went on for 10 years and we're still living with the consequences of it. And it's part of the forever wars and it had other implications for the Middle East and so on. So sometimes it's just about, what are people, sometimes you find quite a lot of agreement with other groups, with other people, but it's just not on their radar as prominently as other issues might be.
Yeah, I
So
think there's definitely
good
something
to look for
about,
consensus.
yeah, the way that we find consensus around certain issues not very popular at all. And you got broad, I mean, there's a broad anti-war, certainly particularly sort of US NATO-led wars in the Middle East.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Yet the major parties don't represent that, but broadly the country does. And then there are some things there is a sort of small consensus on, like for example, particular ways of running the tax system
Mm.
and operating within the City of London. That are there is agreement in some parts of the country on this, but the two main parties absolutely agree on that. And so in that kind of way that the way that this we come to this representation of us as a country through these parties, because it's very easy to say they don't represent us at all, because they don't. But then when you actually get into the weeds of like, well, who are they representing? They are
Mm.
sort of representing a small amount of people in various constituencies that kind of make it. I mean, look at Starmer. The last election was just the absolute best example of that, which is that very few people voted for him, but he gets this incredible majority because
Mm.
individual people that voted for him are the best voters you can get. They're the sort of like super voters that exist in these places where if you get them, you get the whole constituency, you get it all. And I wonder if I don't think proportional representation is going to sort that out. I mean, if you look around Europe, the bigger problems for why these things come around are generally, just like any bloody podcast of this sort of nature, you're just going to say it's capitalism. Just that's the end of it. Not even explain it. But really, you do have to get down to what is funding and what sort of networks of power are creating the conditions under which these governments come about. And just saying, well, we're going to have this system over that system, you're going to end up with the same sort of agreements being made by the parties that end up in power, as Trump is finding out, as he slowly but surely becomes Biden, but a sort of worse version of Biden
Uh,
in some
that'd
ways.
be interesting. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, institutions are the key thing. It's not, and individual political parties and over focusing on what a particular political party can do is might not be the right focus. But you know, it's what we've got. It's where we are. But really, it is about it's about the deep state, in it, if you want to call it that. Or institutional analysis is the more neutral term.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to. No, I don't want to say that fucking line. I think we are ended. It's finished. That's the end of that.
Oh,
I've
yeah,
got.
that's done.
Yeah,